Get the hell out of my lobby. This place isn't for your kind." The words weren't a clumsy mistake, spat out in a moment of anger. They were delivered with the cold, practiced precision of company policy. They were loud, unwavering, and rehearsed. Robert Sterling, the decorated manager of the illustrious The St. Regis in downtown Austin, stood with his arms bolted across his chest, a mask of smug judgment plastered across his face. He wasn't whispering. He wasn't trying to be discreet. He wanted every soul in that cavernous, marble-floored lobby to hear him. He looked directly at her, at the woman of color in unassuming clothes, and made an executive decision that she, and everything she represented, did not belong. What Robert Sterling didn't know, what he couldn't possibly fathom in his starched collar world, was that in exactly 7 minutes, the woman standing before him would not just fire him, but dismantle his entire hand-picked team, right there in the very lobby he guarded like a petty king. But before we dive headfirst into this spectacular collision of power and prejudice, I need to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments below. And if this moment just sent a jolt down your spine, the same way it did for every guest frozen in place around her, do me a favor. Smash that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. It's time to peel back the curtain. Let's rewind to the precise moment this powder keg was lit. Isabella Martinez walked through the towering glass doors of the St. Regis completely alone. There was no fawning assistant trailing behind her, no flashy designer handbag swinging from her arm, no brand labels screaming for attention. Just a simple gray t-shirt that hugged her frame, dark wash jeans, and a pair of worn-in sneakers. Her eyes, calm and assessing, had seen this tired, predictable scene play out 1,000 times before. She moved with a slow, deliberate confidence across the gleaming marble floor, her footsteps barely whispering against the stone. But her presence sent an undeniable ripple through the lobby's hushed atmosphere. She approached the massive, polished wood front desk, a fortress manned by its gatekeepers. Behind it stood Robert, a man of 52, flanked by his 2 most loyal soldiers, Jessica Hayes, 35, a woman whose tight blonde bun seemed to reflect her even tighter, condescending smile, and Mark Chen, 29, arms crossed, his eyes already narrowed with a suspicion that felt almost bored in its application. None of them offered a greeting. None of them cracked a smile. They simply let their gazes crawl over her, sizing her up like she was a stain on their pristine canvas, a problem that had unfortunately wandered in off the street. "I have a reservation," Isabella said, her voice even and smooth, betraying no hint of the storm gathering within her. "The presidential suite. The name is Martinez." Robert squinted, a theatrical display of disbelief, as if she'd just uttered a phrase in a forgotten language. "The presidential suite? Ma'am, that's our highest tier accommodation. Are you absolutely certain you've come to the right hotel?" Isabella refused to dignify the insult with a direct response. She calmly slid her driver's license and a sleek, unassuming black credit card across the polished counter. The card had no limit, a simple piece of plastic that could have bought the entire hotel several times over. Robert picked them up with 2 fingers, holding the card as if it were contaminated, as if touching it might tarnish his very being. "Strange," he muttered under his breath, yet loud enough for everyone to hear. "This looks highly suspicious." Jessica, without missing a beat, pressed a discreet button on the console hidden beneath the desk. Her voice, sharp and laced with artificial concern, echoed through the lobby's hidden speaker system. "Security to the front lobby. We may have an unauthorized individual attempting to access one of our premium suites. Possible fraudulent activity." Isabella's expression remained a mask of tranquility. Her voice stayed low, almost conversational. "I assure you I'm not here for trouble. I'm here for my room." Mark scoffed, a short, ugly sound. You know, people try this nonsense all the time. Find a fancy card, invent a fake name. They usually hope we're too busy to run a proper check. From across the opulent room, a young woman named Chloe, a travel vlogger visiting from Los Angeles, had already raised her smartphone. "I'm filming this," she whispered urgently to her friend, David. He immediately understood. Turning his own phone to landscape mode, David started a live stream. "We're at the St. Regis in Austin, Texas," he narrated, his voice low and tense. "And we are watching something truly ugly unfold in real time." At a small concierge desk tucked away to the side, a young employee named Sophia Ramirez glanced up from her computer screen. Her eyes met Isabella's for a fleeting second. In that silent, swift exchange, something intangible passed between them. A flicker of recognition, a wave of profound concern. Sophia took a hesitant step forward, but a withering glare from Robert cut her off, freezing her in place. "She doesn't belong here," he snapped, his voice a low growl meant only for Sophia, but his message was clear to everyone. Isabella took out her own phone and sent a single, silent text. In a gleaming corporate office just 5 blocks away, her executive assistant, Nina Sharma, responded instantly. "It's happening again," Isabella typed. Nina didn't need any more detail. "The system is armed and ready. Your command." Robert was still holding her card, flipping it over and over in his fingers, as if he could divine its secrets through sheer contempt. "You know," he said, his voice rising, playing to the now growing audience of hotel guests. "We've seen this exact scam a dozen times. Someone comes in, claims to have a major booking, flashes a high-limit card they probably skimmed, and then vanishes the moment we get the bank on the phone. Well, not this time. Not in my hotel." He turned to Mark, handing him the card with a dramatic flourish. "Lock it up. Evidence." Mark took the card eagerly, his movements exaggerated and performative. He walked to a small cabinet nestled behind the desk, revealing a brushed steel safe. He placed Isabella's card inside with the kind of care usually reserved for biohazardous material, and slammed the heavy door shut. "You're done here," he said, a smug smile spreading across his face. Chloe, still filming, exclaimed, her voice filled with outrage. "They just took her credit card. They locked it in a safe." David stepped closer, his own phone steady. "That's not just bad service, that's theft. That can't be legal." Isabella didn't move a muscle. Her voice, however, dropped an octave, carrying a chilling calm. "You are all going to deeply, profoundly regret this." The memory was seared into her soul. She was 22, fresh out of business school, walking into a boutique hotel in Charleston after a grueling red-eye flight. She was wearing comfortable sweats, utterly exhausted from a week of high-stakes meetings, and holding a confirmed reservation. The man at the desk had looked her up and down, a sneer playing on his lips, and said, "You don't look like someone who can afford to stay here." He claimed the system was down, and that she should come back in the morning when the manager was available. She had spent that night sleeping in her cramped rental car, the sting of humiliation a far greater discomfort than the awkward angle of the driver's seat. The next morning, fueled by cold fury and lukewarm coffee, she began drafting the business plan for what would eventually become the largest and most successful independent hospitality group in the world. Now, standing in a lobby she owned, in a flagship hotel bearing a brand she had painstakingly built, the same tone, the same baseless assumption, the same kind of small man was trying to erase her all over again. Robert leaned forward, his voice dripping with condescension. "Your reservation has been canceled. We have a zero-tolerance policy for deception here. You're holding up our real, paying guests." Isabella didn't even flinch. "You mean the ones who are all watching this happen right now?" she asked, gesturing subtly toward Chloe and David, who were still filming, their phones acting as silent, unblinking witnesses. Other guests had stopped their own conversations, their own check-ins, Some were staring openly, their faces masks of shock and disgust. Others were whispering amongst themselves, their discomfort palpable. Sophia looked on from her desk, her jaw clenched so tightly it ached. Jessica stepped forward, trying to reassert control. "You need to leave the premises. Now." Isabella held her gaze, her eyes like polished obsidian. "Are you absolutely certain about that?" Jessica's tone dripped with a false, practiced confidence. "Completely positive. Either you walk out on your own, or we will have the authorities escort you out." Robert smirked, clearly enjoying the spectacle he had orchestrated. "Go ahead, make a scene. I assure you, it won't end well for you." Isabella didn't blink. "That is the absolute last time you will ever speak to me like that." Sophia finally found her voice and stepped forward, her hands trembling but her resolve firm. "She's right. Her reservation is valid. I saw her name in our system this morning. I flagged it for special preparations." Robert turned on her, his face contorting into a mask of rage. "One more word out of you, Ramirez, and you're gone too, understand?" Isabella raised her phone again, her voice slightly louder this time, clear and crisp. "Nina, log this precise moment. Lock in all the video timestamps from the hotel's security feeds." Nina's voice came back, just as clear. "Logged. Systems are ready to engage on your mark." David leaned toward the front desk, pointing his phone's camera toward the small glass window on the safe. "The card in there says, I, Martinez, Chairman's Circle. It's a real designation. She's legitimate." Robert scoffed dismissively. "Anyone can print a fake card. People like her—" Isabella interrupted him, her voice slicing through the tension. "Finish that sentence, Robert. Go on, I dare you." He didn't. The words shriveled and died in his throat as he finally took in the growing circle of eyes surrounding them, the sea of raised smartphones, all pointed directly at him. Isabella took one step forward. She was still calm, still perfectly in control, but every syllable she uttered carried the weight of a death sentence. "You have just made the single worst mistake of your entire professional life," she said, her voice a low, chilling promise. Robert smiled, a pathetic attempt to cling to the last vestiges of his power. "You really think so?" She stared directly into his eyes, her gaze unflinching. "No, Robert, I know so." And as the suffocating tension gripped the grand lobby like a tightening noose, no one, not Robert, not Jessica, not Mark, had any earthly idea who she truly was. But they were all about to find out, in the most public and humiliating way imaginable. How would you feel if you were in Isabella's shoes? What would your first move be? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Mark Chen's voice boomed across the lobby, dripping with a forced theatrical authority. He held up the small silver key to the safe, as if it were the spoils of a great victory. "This credit card is now considered company property," he declared, his voice full of self-important bravado. "And until the bank can verify its authenticity, which could take several business days, you will not be getting it back." He grinned, a smug, performative smirk that played to the invisible crowd in his mind, completely misreading the actual room. Behind him, the safe door clicked shut with a cold, metallic finality that echoed in the suddenly silent space. But Mark, in his blissful ignorance, had no idea he had just personally invited a Category 5 hurricane into their pristine, well-ordered world. Isabella Martinez stood there, an unwavering pillar of calm. Her face was an unreadable mask, her profound silence more commanding, more intimidating than any shouting match could ever be. Robert leaned in again, his eyes flicking nervously toward the slowly growing crowd of onlookers. "You're wasting everyone's time, and frankly, you're creating a disturbance," he hissed. "Walk out of here now, or we will physically make that choice for you." That was the cue for Jessica. Emboldened by her manager's aggressive stance and Mark's petty theatrics, she stepped out from behind the fortress of the front desk. She straightened her already immaculate blazer and, in a shocking breach of protocol, reached out and grabbed Isabella's arm. "You've been warned," she said through gritted teeth. "It's time for you to leave." The moment her fingers made contact, the entire atmosphere in the lobby shifted from tense to volatile. Gasps erupted from the assembled guests. Chloe Lynn's phone instantly captured the movement. "She just assaulted her! She just put her hands on her!" she shouted, already uploading the raw clip to every social media platform she used with a simple, incendiary caption. "Happening live at the St. Regis in Austin. Staff assaulting a guest." David's livestream numbers were now skyrocketing, well over 1,000 viewers, with a chat log scrolling so fast it was impossible to read. A torrent of shock, outrage, and disbelief. Sophia Ramirez lunged forward, her voice trembling but filled with a righteous fury that surprised everyone, including herself. "You cannot put your hands on a guest," she said sharply, her eyes blazing. "Her reservation is absolutely valid." Jessica spun around, her eyes flashing with a venomous anger. "You stay out of this, Sophia, if you have any desire to keep your job." But Sophia refused to back down. She looked at Isabella, who still hadn't moved a single inch, and took a small, defiant step closer to her, planting her feet. "I will not lie for any of you," she said, her voice now ringing with clarity and conviction, her gaze fixed on Robert. That was the exact moment Robert Sterling abandoned all pretense of professional decorum. "She is trying to scam us," he hissed, his voice dropping lower, becoming more poisonous. "People like her. They always think they can play the system, look for a handout." But his words, meant to be a conspiratorial whisper, reached the ears of at least 3 guests standing just a few feet away. One of them, a distinguished, silver-haired woman, raised her phone a little higher and said to no one in particular, "I simply cannot believe what I am hearing." Another, a man in a crisp navy suit, leaned toward David's streaming phone and said clearly, "You getting all of this, son?" David just nodded, his eyes wide. Every last word. In the epicenter of this swirling vortex of hostility, Isabella remained perfectly still. She brought her phone back to her ear. "Nina," she said calmly, her voice a stark contrast to the chaos around her. "Escalate the internal security system. I want you to begin full audit documentation. I want every single word spoken from this point forward logged, transcribed, and prepared." On the other end, Nina Sharma's voice was crisp and efficient. "Understood, Ms. Martinez. The entire incident is time-stamped and being recorded by our internal servers. Do you require Carla to be on standby?" "Give me 1 more minute," Isabella replied, her eyes never leaving Robert's face. As she said it, Mark leaned over the desk, shouting loud enough for the people at the far end of the lobby to hear him clearly. "You're a fraud, lady. You think flashing a stolen credit card gets you into a place like this? Go back to whatever slum you crawled out of." A chorus of shocked murmurs rose from the assembled guests. Sophia was now completely out from behind her concierge podium, standing shoulder to shoulder with Isabella, a silent, steadfast guardian. "I have worked at this hotel for 3 years," she said, her voice firm and unwavering, "and I have seen this exact pattern of behavior before. Every single time a guest who looks like her walks in here alone, confident, dressed down, you and your team treat them like they are criminals." Robert's eyes narrowed into tiny slits of hate. "And every single time someone questions it," Sophia continued, her courage growing with every word, "you claim it's hotel policy. But it's not. It's you." A memory, sharp and painful, pierced through Isabella's composure. She was 16, dressed in her Sunday best, waiting patiently in a hotel lobby in Miami. Her parents were running late, stuck in traffic. A stern-faced clerk had walked up to her and said, This area is for paying guests only, young lady. She tried to explain, to tell the woman her parents were on their way, that they had a room. But the woman didn't listen. She was unceremoniously escorted to the sidewalk and told to wait there, like a common loiterer. The shame of that moment had embedded itself in her bones for years. It didn't make her smaller, it made her sharper, it made her build an empire. Robert wasn't finished. He turned his full, venomous attention to Sophia. Enough! I want her out of my lobby now, or I will have security escort both of you out into the street. Jessica, who had been momentarily silenced when Chloe's camera had swung back to her, quickly chimed in, trying to regain the upper hand. She refused to provide a valid form of identification. This is a clear breach of our security protocols. I am officially reporting it. But the tide of opinion in the lobby was already turning decisively against them. David, still filming, pivoted the camera to his own face for a moment. "Just so everyone watching is perfectly clear," he said, his voice ringing with indignation. "We are watching a hotel guest be systematically harassed by the management staff after she provided her name, her ID, and her credit card. And now they are physically attempting to remove her. This is not just bad customer service. This is absolutely disgusting." Isabella finally turned to Mark, her voice no louder than a whisper, but it cut through the noise like a surgeon's scalpel. "Return my card to me, now." Mark leaned over the counter, his smug smirk returning. "Or what?" Isabella's eyes didn't move. "Or you will be permanently locked out of the Horizon Hospitality Group system for the rest of your life. No future employment, no professional references, no possibility of an appeal." Jessica snorted with derisive laughter. "You don't speak for Horizon Hospitality." But Sophia spoke up immediately, her voice strong and clear. "Actually, she does." Robert's voice snapped like a whip. "You are so far out of line, Ramirez. You don't even have a clue who this person is," Chloe interjected from the side, her voice filled with a dawning realization. "Oh, I think she does. And I think we all do now." She turned her camera back to Isabella. "Look at the way she's standing. Look at how calm and collected she is. That is not the posture of someone begging for a service. That is the posture of someone allowing you to dig your own grave." Isabella's voice remained steady, a chillingly calm counterpoint to the escalating chaos. "Mark, this is your last chance." For the first time, a flicker of doubt, of uncertainty, crossed Mark's face. Robert tried to salvage the rapidly deteriorating moment. "This is not about anything personal," he blustered, his words sounding hollow even to his own ears. "This is simply about following protocol." But his words were far too little, far too late. Chloe and David's videos were already going viral, spreading across the internet like a digital wildfire. Guests throughout the lobby were whispering to each other, sharing what they had just seen and heard. One man, a frequent guest at the hotel, said loud enough for Robert to hear, "I have been staying at this hotel for over a decade. Never again." A young woman holding a carry-on suitcase turned to Sophia and asked, her voice hushed with awe, "Is she really who I think she is?" Sophia didn't answer, but her small, tight-lipped smile said everything that needed to be said. Then, the final twist that completely shifted the temperature in the lobby from chilly to arctic. Sophia stepped forward, her voice louder now, filled with the confidence of someone who knows they are on the right side of history. This is not the first time Robert has ignored complaints just like this one. He has been officially warned. I personally logged 3 of them in the last month alone. 2 were from solo female travelers of color. All of them were dismissed without investigation. Robert's face flushed a deep, mottled red. "That is a complete and utter lie." David swung his camera toward him. "Are you absolutely sure about that?" Isabella looked around the lobby slowly, at the sea of raised phones, the wall of silent, judging eyes. Every guest was paying rapt attention. She said, her voice now resonating with an authority that had nothing to do with volume, "Your time running this place, unchecked and unchallenged, is officially over." Robert tried one last, desperate, pathetic move. "Fine. If you won't leave, I will call the police myself and have you removed for trespassing." Isabella smiled, a slow, cold smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Please do," she said. And for a single, terrifying moment, Robert hesitated, because for the first time, he saw something in her face that truly and deeply unsettled him. It wasn't fear, it wasn't uncertainty, it was power. Pure, controlled, silent power, and it was far, far beyond his reach. Guests began to move, subtly at first, but with a deliberate, collective purpose. They began stepping between Isabella and the front desk, forming a loose, protective barrier. They didn't know her name yet, not for sure, but they knew enough. One woman nonchalantly rolled her large suitcase directly into Jessica's path. Another man unplugged his phone charger from an outlet at the desk and simply stood beside Sophia, a silent sentinel. David turned his phone around, capturing the growing crowd. "They are protecting her now," he said into his stream, his voice filled with awe. "The guests are standing with her." Isabella, still in the center of this human shield, took a single, deliberate step forward and said one simple sentence. "This lobby belongs to me." The words didn't need to be shouted. They landed with the force of a physical blow. Mark's smirk finally faltered and died. Jessica looked down at her feet, unable to watch. Robert blinked, a single, rapid, terrified blink, and in that split second of stunned silence, the lobby, which had once been so hostile, so unwelcoming, began to turn. The power had shifted, irrevocably and completely. What would you have done if you had witnessed this unfold? Would you have spoken up? Would you have started filming? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. "Get her out of here now!" Robert's voice, now high and shrill, cracked across the marble lobby like a gavel wielded by a desperate man. He was frantically trying to regain a control that had already evaporated into thin air, slipped right through his grasping fingers. The lobby was no longer quiet. The whispers had swelled into open, indignant protests. Phones were raised high, a forest of digital eyes capturing his spectacular downfall. But Robert, his face a blotchy, furious red, trembled with an authority he no longer possessed, pressing forward into his own ruin. "She's trespassing! She's a liar! A fraud!" he bellowed. He spun toward the intercom, slamming his palm down on the button with such force that a crack appeared on the plastic. Mark's voice, amplified and distorted, crackled across the entire lobby's speaker system. "To all staff members, there is an unauthorized individual in the main lobby. Do not engage. I repeat, do not engage with this guest. We have a fraud alert in effect." The moment the announcement ended, the silence that followed was heavier, more suffocating than the words themselves. Isabella didn't so much as flinch, but the guests did. Chloe Lynn shouted from her corner of the lobby, her voice shaking, not with fear, but with a palpable fury. "She is not a fraud. We are recording every single thing you do and say." David's live stream view count had exploded, now rocketing past 5,000. The comments were a cascading waterfall of outrage. "That is 100% theft. Unreal. How is this happening in a supposed luxury hotel?" A mother, who had been standing in the check-in line with her teenage daughter, slowly backed away, whispering to her child, "They are going to regret this so much." Meanwhile, Jessica, visibly shaken but still grimly following Robert's lead, grabbed Isabella's arm again this time yanking her hard toward the main entrance. "Let's go, you are embarrassing yourself," she hissed through clenched teeth, her face a mask of panicked rage. That was when Sophia Ramirez moved. She physically stepped between them. The youngest, lowest-ranking staff member in the room, the only one who had consistently spoken up, now stood shoulder to shoulder with Isabella, a small but unmovable obstacle. "Do not touch her again," she said, her voice loud and clear, ringing with an authority she didn't know she possessed. Jessica froze, stunned by the act of open defiance. "You'll be fired for this," she spat, her voice venomous. Sophia didn't even blink. "Then fire me," she snapped back. "But you are not putting your hands on her again." Robert surged forward, his frustration finally boiling over into pure, undiluted rage. "Do you have any idea who she is?" he barked at Sophia, his voice cracking. "She's a fraud, look at her!" He gestured wildly at Isabella's simple t-shirt, her jeans, her worn sneakers, as if the clothes themselves were irrefutable proof of some crime. "People who stay in our presidential suites do not look like that." Isabella's voice was quiet, measured, yet it cut through his rant like a diamond blade. "You keep using that word, Robert. Fraud. As if saying it enough times will somehow make your monumental mistake disappear." She took one small, deliberate step forward. The distance between them closed, and with it, the noose of his own making tightened around his narrative. At 29, Isabella had flown into Los Angeles for a critical acquisitions conference. She'd been wearing a perfectly tailored navy pantsuit. Professional, understated, but not extravagant. The man behind the check-in desk had looked at her ID, then back at her face, then again at her credit card. "This can't be you," he had said, his tone dripping with suspicion. "We will need to see a second form of identification." She had provided one, then another. They still made her wait for 2 excruciating hours while they verified her identity. Meanwhile, she watched as 3 white men, dressed in casual golf shirts, walked in and were handed keys to their own suites without ever being asked to show a single piece of ID. That night, in her hotel room, she drafted the radical new policy she would later implement across her entire hotel empire. 0 tolerance for guest profiling. 0. That moment lived in her bones, and now, so did this one. "Get security," Robert barked at Mark, who had stepped away from the desk and was now hovering nervously near the hallway, leading to the back offices, his bravado completely gone. "Call them in here right now." But Mark hesitated. His confidence had completely shattered. Because standing in front of him was not a woman begging for entry, but someone who held a knowledge he did not possess. And worse, so much worse, the guests were all watching. Chloe's phone moved from face to face, capturing every guilty twitch, every flinch of a power that was now draining away like sand through their fingers. David, still live-streaming, turned toward a guest standing nearby. "Sir, can you tell us what you're seeing here?" The man replied without a moment's hesitation, his voice clear and strong. "I see someone getting thrown out of a hotel that she so clearly belongs in. It's a disgrace." Robert spun around, his eyes wild. "That's slander. She hasn't proven a single thing." Isabella calmly turned her phone toward the crowd. "Would anyone here like to see some proof?" David immediately called out, "Yes, show them." But she didn't lift a badge or pull a contract out of a briefcase. Instead, she turned to Sophia and asked softly, "Sophia, do you see my name in the reservation system?" Sophia nodded, her eyes shining. "Yes, Ms. Martinez. It's under I. Martinez, Presidential Suite. It says you checked in remotely." "And is there a VIP tag attached to that reservation?" Isabella continued, her voice still calm. Sophia nodded again. "Yes, it's marked as Executive Level Override, Owner Level Clearance." The lobby fell deathly silent. Robert's eyes darted around the room, desperately searching for an escape that didn't exist. That could have been faked. She could have hacked into our system, Chloe snapped from across the room. Are you seriously suggesting that someone just walked in here off the street, hacked your corporate computer system, and just happened to bring 2,000 live witnesses with them on their phone? Lauren, who was now deathly pale, stared at the floor. Mark stepped forward hesitantly. I locked the card in the safe under your direct instruction, Robert. What if we are wrong about this? Isabella turned her piercing gaze toward him. You were told to steal my property from me. That is what you did. But you had a choice, and you chose to obey an unlawful order. Mark's mouth opened, then snapped shut again. He had nothing to say. Then the crowd shifted. A guest, an older woman with elegant white hair and a colorful floral scarf, moved forward. She positioned herself directly between Isabella and Jessica and said, her voice ringing with the authority of her years, "You are not laying a hand on this young woman again." Another man joined her, then a woman pushing a stroller. Within seconds, a loose half-circle had formed in front of Isabella, a human barrier, the guests themselves drawing a line in the sand. Robert stood behind the desk, suddenly looking much smaller, much more pathetic than he had just moments ago. Isabella looked around at the human wall that had risen to protect her without her even asking. "This," she said softly, her voice filled with a quiet emotion, "is what happens when good people decide that silence is no longer an option." David turned his phone to capture the scene. "They are standing with her now," he said into the camera, his voice thick with emotion. "And I don't think they are going anywhere." Robert's desperation hit its absolute peak. He shouted over the noise in the lobby, "You are all being manipulated! She's a performer! She's playing you!" And then Mark, who was still standing near the intercom microphone, whispered something, barely audible. But in the dead silence of the lobby, the sensitive microphone picked it up and broadcast it through every speaker in the room. "She owns the entire place, doesn't she?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Chloe slowly panned her phone toward Isabella's face. "Do you?" she asked, her voice breathless. Sophia stepped forward. "She does." Gasps rippled across the room. A man near the lounge chairs whispered, "Wait, this isn't just her hotel, it's her company." Lauren turned to Robert, her face a mask of pure horror. "You told us she was lying." Robert didn't speak. He couldn't. David looked directly into his lens. And this is the exact moment that everything changed. Isabella stepped forward again, moving past Sophia, past the protective half-circle of guests, until she was standing directly in front of the desk where Robert stood, frozen and defeated. "You wanted me out of your lobby," she said evenly. "You framed me as a thief. You called me a fraud. And you attempted to humiliate me in front of the world, in my own lobby." Robert opened his mouth, but no words came out. From her phone, Nina's voice came through, loud and clear. "Isabella, Carla is ready. Do you want me to patch her through to the lobby system?" Isabella's eyes never left Robert's face. "Yes, Nina, right now." She tapped her screen once, and the clear, sharp, deliberate voice of Carla Bennett, the head of her global legal team, came through the lobby's overhead speaker system. "Isabella, everything has been prepared. We are standing by for your final authorization." Isabella took a deep breath. "Terminate Robert Sterling. Terminate Jessica Hayes. Terminate Mark Chen. Immediate removal from the Horizon Hospitality Group system. Freeze all their access credentials and log today's entire incident for a full legal and ethics audit." A beat of stunned silence. "Confirmed," Carla said, her voice echoing in the marble hall. Processing now. And in that instant, Robert's access badge, clipped to his pocket, emitted a loud, angry buzz and turned a permanent, solid red. So did Jessica's. So did Mark's. They were locked out, live, in front of every single guest and thousands of viewers online. There was no shouting, no dramatic theatrics. Just justice. Quiet, complete, and absolutely irreversible. And in the eyes of every single guest present, a single, undeniable truth became crystal clear. This woman hadn't just defended herself. She had dismantled an entire corrupt system in 7 minutes flat. Robert Sterling's last shred of carefully constructed composure shattered into a million pieces the instant his access badge buzzed its angry final note of defiance. He stared at it, completely stunned, as if the small piece of plastic had personally betrayed him. Mark's face drained of all color as his own badge blinked the same damning error message, unceremoniously booting him from the Horizon system in real time. Jessica froze, her lips parted in silent disbelief, her hand still gripping the edge of the granite counter as if holding on to it could somehow prevent her career from vanishing into the abyss beneath her feet. But the lobby had already fundamentally shifted. What had once felt like a theater of petty dominance now pulsed with the energy of a full-blown rebellion. Sophia Ramirez, no longer the silent, timid concierge, stood tall and proud beside Isabella, her jaw set, her voice steady and strong. "They have been removed from the system," she announced, loud enough for every guest in the lobby to hear. "They no longer speak for Horizon hospitality." Robert erupted, his voice a choked, desperate squawk. "This is illegal. You can't just... This is not how hotel operations are conducted." He spun towards Jessica, his eyes wide with panic. "Call corporate. Get someone from regional on the line right now." But Jessica's hands trembled as she fumbled with her phone. "Blocked," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Horizon's internal communications system. It has shut down all my staff login credentials. I'm completely locked out. Everything's just gone." Mark tried to take a step toward the safe, a desperate, last-ditch effort to retrieve Isabella's card. But Sophia raised her hand, a gesture of absolute authority. "Stop right there," she commanded, her newfound power resonating in her voice. "You are no longer authorized to handle any guest property. Step away from the counter." Mark hesitated for a split second, then backed off slowly, his defeat complete. And then, the final, pathetic push. Robert, boiling in a stew of his own embarrassment and impotent rage, lashed out in the most vile way possible. "Do you really think this little circus makes you a leader?" he snarled at Isabella, his face contorted in a mask of ugly resentment. "You tricked your way in here. You ambushed us. You humiliated us in public. You will be sued for this." But his voice cracked on the last few words, betraying the terror that lay beneath the bluster. He was no longer in control, and he knew it. Isabella, still unnervingly calm, tilted her head slightly. "You think leadership is about hiding things, Robert? About manipulating perception?" She gestured to the guests who were still gathered around them, a silent jury. "This is what leadership looks like. It's when people who have been systematically ignored for far too long finally speak up and find that they are being heard." Right on cue, a woman in the crowd raised her voice, clear and strong. "You never took my complaint seriously last spring," she said, her eyes fixed on Robert. "I emailed your office about a deeply uncomfortable incident at check-in, and no one ever followed up. You were the one who responded to my email, dismissing my concerns completely." Robert turned sharply to see her face, then quickly looked away, a flash of recognition in his eyes. Another voice rose from the crowd. "I was charged twice for a single night's stay, and got no response from your billing department until I threatened to bring in legal action." A man chimed in from behind the lounge chairs. I specifically requested an ADA-compliant room and was told in no uncertain terms that none were available. Then I sat here and watched another person check in half an hour later and get one. One by one, the voices of the guests began to rise, a chorus of past slights, of ignored complaints, of denied accountability. Sophia stepped forward again, now fully emboldened by the truth and the immediate, satisfying consequence of her actions. I personally logged 3 separate guest complaints in the last 2 months alone, all of them related to biased behavior at this very front desk. They were all dismissed by you, Robert, every single time. You personally signed off on the dismissals yourself. Jessica backed up until her back hit the wall, her eyes darting frantically between the accusatory faces of the guests and her former co-workers. "Robert, what is this?" she whispered, her voice filled with panic. They're all turning on us." Robert's voice was now reduced to a pathetic whimper. "They're just angry. This will all just blow over." But it didn't. It grew and grew and grew. David panned his live stream across the packed lobby. "This is what a reckoning looks like," he said to his ever-growing audience of viewers. "They pushed one person too far, and now all the other people they've pushed are finally speaking out." Then came the moment that cemented it all. Chloe Lynn pulled up her post on X, which was now going mega viral. Hundreds of thousands of views, thousands of reposts, screenshots of Mark's arrogant intercom announcement, the now infamous quote, "This card is now company property." Beneath it, a crystal-clear clip of Jessica grabbing Isabella's arm. Another of Robert yelling, his face contorted with rage, "People like her don't belong here." It was spreading like an unstoppable wildfire. "It's all out there now," Chloe said aloud, her voice ringing with triumph. "Everyone is seeing it. The world is watching." Robert's desperation snapped again. He lunged toward the counter, shouting, "Delete that video right now. That's private property." But 2 male guests stepped directly in his path. One of them, a quiet, scholarly-looking man with reading glasses and a messenger bag, simply said, "No, you don't get to silence this too." The other guest, an elderly woman in a floral shawl, held out her own phone, its screen displaying the viral video. "Your face is already all over the internet, son. You might want to think twice before you make another threat." That was the absolute tipping point. Jessica finally turned to Isabella, her voice shaking, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't know," she said, her voice a desperate plea. "I swear I didn't mean for any of this to happen." But Isabella didn't nod sympathetically. She didn't offer a word of comfort. She simply said, "You helped make it happen. You stood by and you watched it happen. And then you participated." And then Robert did something that no one in the room expected. He turned to Isabella, his voice ragged and raw, his shoulders finally slumping in defeat. "Why didn't you just say who you were?" he asked, his voice filled with a pathetic, self-pitying bewilderment. You set us all up." Isabella blinked, a slow, deliberate motion. "No, Robert. I gave you every single opportunity to treat me like any other guest who walks through those doors. That was the only test, and you failed it, publicly and spectacularly." That was when Nina's voice returned, now on speaker through Isabella's phone. "Isabella, the board of directors has authorized a full and immediate incident response. Carla is ready for your next steps." Isabella looked out across the lobby, her gaze scanning every stunned face, every guest still holding a phone, still bearing silent witness to this extraordinary event. "Patch her through." Carla Bennett's voice, crisp, measured, and filled with an iron-clad authority, filled the air once more. "Robert Sterling, Jessica Hayes, Mark Chen, effective immediately, your employment with Horizon Hospitality Group is hereby terminated. Your system access has been permanently revoked. Full legal documentation is being prepared as we speak. Ms. Martinez will now supervise the next steps here directly. To all our valued guests, please be advised. A new leadership team will be addressing all of your concerns momentarily. The weight of those words hit the room like a clap of thunder. Mark tried one last feeble protest. "This is completely insane. We built this place." But Isabella cut him off, her voice like ice. "You built nothing, you guarded a door, and you turned away the very people that we, as a company, claim to serve." She then turned to Sophia. "Sophia, please unlock the safe and retrieve my card." Sophia moved with a newfound efficiency and professionalism. She entered a new master code into the safe's keypad, her own, and opened the heavy door. Isabella's simple black card lay inside, untouched, pristine. Sophia handed it back to her without a single word, but her eyes were glassy with unshed tears of relief and vindication. Then came the guests. One by one they began to clap. Not loudly, not chaotically, but with a purposeful, measured rhythm, as if acknowledging a moment of justice that was long overdue. Isabella looked out over them and spoke, not with anger, but with an unwavering certainty. "This was never just about me. This was about every single guest who was ever made to feel like their very presence was a problem. It was about every legitimate complaint that was made to disappear into a corporate black hole. Every company policy that was used to humiliate rather than to serve. That all ends today." Robert, Jessica, and Mark stood silently behind the counter, stripped of their titles, their power, and their audience. And yet, the consequences of their actions had only just begun. Isabella turned back to her assistant, who was still on the phone. "Nina, we are proceeding with a full, lobby-level reform of this entire hotel. Prepare the official corporate statement, and please elevate Sophia Ramirez's status in the system. She will be leading this location, effective immediately." "Yes, ma'am," Nina replied, without a moment's hesitation. And with that, Isabella Martinez stepped forward, past the desk, and into the center of the lobby. She was no longer a mistaken identity, no longer an anonymous guest. She had just taken her hotel back, one quiet, deliberate, and powerful decision at a time. The real work was just beginning. Isabella Carter stood at the epicenter of the grand marble lobby, a silent, composed figure, while the 3 disgraced former employees she had just fired stood frozen behind the massive front desk. Their faces were pale, their reputations shattered beyond repair, and their power utterly and completely extinguished. Robert's eyes, once filled with an arrogant, unassailable command, now flicked rapidly and nervously between the guests. The sea of live-streaming smartphones, and the woman he had so foolishly and fatefully accused of being a fraud. Mark stared blankly at the now open and empty safe, its only valuable contents, the simple black card he had so brazenly mocked, now resting securely back in Isabella's hand. Jessica had gone completely quiet, her lips slightly parted, her gaze locked on the intricate pattern of the marble floor, no longer daring to meet the eyes of anyone in the room. Around them, the guests remained fixed in place, unwilling to turn away, to miss a single second of this unfolding drama. The palpable tension had not eased. It had simply evolved into a kind of breathless anticipation, as if every person in that room instinctively knew that they were on the cusp of something permanent, something truly transformative. Isabella turned slowly, deliberately facing the crowd. Then, adjusting the hem of her simple gray t-shirt, she stepped forward and began to speak. She was not speaking for the cameras, nor was she speaking for applause. She spoke with the clear, unwavering, and powerful tone of a woman who had earned the right to every single word. "My name is Isabella Martinez," she said, her voice resonating in the hushed space. "I am the founder and the chief executive officer of the Horizon Hospitality Group. And as of this exact moment, I am officially reclaiming this hotel, not just from the handful of people who so egregiously misused their roles, but from every single pathetic excuse they ever tried to hide behind. The words hit the lobby like a shockwave. Phones were lowered slightly. Eyebrows shot up. One guest audibly gasped. Another whispered to his wife, "She owns it. She owns the entire company." David's live stream comments exploded in real time. "CEO. This just flipped the entire script. What a power move." "Hi." Robert stumbled forward, his hands raised in a pathetic gesture of protest. Wait. This isn't how we do things. You're the CEO. You should have... There is a protocol for this. There are established procedures. You ambushed us." "No," Isabella replied, her gaze never breaking from his. "I walked into this hotel just like every other guest. I was quiet, I was alone, and I was respectful. The only thing I did not bring with me today was a sense of entitlement and privilege. And you, Robert, proved without any prompting from me how you and your hand-picked team respond to someone who does not immediately look the part." Mark shook his head slowly, muttering, "We didn't know. We couldn't possibly have known." "You didn't need to know," she snapped back, her voice like the crack of a whip. "That is the entire point." At that, Sophia Ramirez stepped to Isabella's side, her voice soft but filled with a newfound certainty. "I recognized the name when she first checked in. I saw the presidential suite tag, the owner-level override clearance in the system. I knew exactly who she was, but I didn't speak up. Not right away. And I am so sorry for that." Isabella turned to her, her expression softening. "You did more than anyone else in this lobby today, Sophia. You told the truth when it was hard. You stood up when it was easier to stay silent. And now, you will be promoted to the position of Guest Services Director for this entire property, effective today." Sophia's eyes widened, her face a mask of stunned disbelief. A few of the guests began to clap again, this time slower, more deliberately. It was not for the spectacle, but for the simple, beautiful act of justice they had just witnessed. A moment of quiet, profound triumph unfolded right there in the lobby. Jessica spoke for the first time in what felt like an eternity. I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said, her voice trembling on the verge of tears. I didn't know what else to do." Isabella regarded her carefully, her eyes searching. "You had a choice, Jessica. You always have a choice. You made yours when you pressed that intercom button. You made it again when you grabbed my arm. You made it when you laughed at my expense, when you stood by and watched your colleague lock away my private property as if I didn't even matter." Then, without any warning, Jessica completely cracked. "It was Robert," she cried, tears now streaming down her face. "He was the one who told us how to deal with certain people who didn't match the profile of our top-tier guests. He said that we were just protecting the brand's image. I thought it was normal." Robert whipped his head around, his face contorted with a furious, desperate rage. "That is a complete and utter lie." Isabella raised a hand, immediately silencing them both. "No," she said, "it's not a lie. It is a confession, and rest assured, we will be documenting every single word of it." Carla's voice returned over the lobby's sound system, steady and cool as ice. "We have logged the admission, Isabella. This will be immediately escalated to our corporate compliance and legal teams for further action." A few of the guests nodded in silent approval. One woman, who was holding her small toddler, said aloud, "It's about time that someone was actually held accountable." David, who was still recording, spoke directly into his camera. "She didn't just fire them. She has exposed the entire corrupt system from the very top down." Mark stepped forward weakly. "What's going to happen to us now?" "You will each receive a formal notice of termination from our Human Resources Department," Isabella said, her voice devoid of any emotion. Your names will be flagged across the entire Horizon Hospitality hiring network. You are permanently banned from any future employment with any of our properties, anywhere in the world. And if we discover any prior misconduct that was covered up under your supervision, further legal action will follow. Robert stared at her, his face ashen, like a man who has just realized, far too late, that he has picked a fight with a god. All of this, just because you wanted to prove a point? No, she said, her voice dropping to a cold, chilling whisper. All of this because I am so incredibly tired of people like you deciding who does and does not deserve respect based on nothing more than their own pathetic, preconceived notions. From the crowd, Chloe raised her voice. They tried to erase her, and now she is rewriting the damn rules for all of them. Isabella stepped aside, allowing Sophia to move behind the massive front desk. Reset the entire check-in system. I want you to suspend any pending reservations that have been flagged under Robert's staff ID. We will personally reach out to all of the affected guests and offer them our sincerest apologies and full compensation. Sophia nodded and immediately got to work, her hands now steady and empowered. Isabella turned her attention back to the guests. If any of you have ever experienced any form of mistreatment at this property, either today or at any time in the past, our internal corporate team will be stationed in this lobby for the rest of the day. I have instructed my assistant, Nina, to open direct lines of communication for all guest complaints, and I personally guarantee you that we will respond to every single one within 48 hours. No form letters, no public relations fluff, just real answers. The room, which had been standing so still, began to buzz, not with chaos, but with a newfound clarity. Guests murmured in agreement. One elderly man tipped his hat to Isabella and said, "Thank you, young lady, for not just walking away." Isabella nodded gently in his direction. "I've walked away from this far too many times in my life. Not anymore." Carla's voice came through one last time. "Media outlets have already picked up the footage. X and Reddit are circulating the videos without any need for hashtags. The narrative is building on its own, Isabella, but you are the one in control of it." Isabella gave a firm nod. "Let them talk. Let the public see what happens when a company doesn't just apologize for its mistakes, but takes immediate and decisive action." Then she turned back toward Robert, Jessica, and Mark. "You're all dismissed. Your personal belongings will be collected and sent to you. A member of our corporate security team will now escort you from the premises. You are not to speak to or approach any of our guests on your way out." Sophia looked at her. "Should I notify building security?" "No," Isabella replied, her voice firm. "Let them walk through this lobby. Let every single one of our guests see the clear and unavoidable consequence of unchecked, biased behavior." As the three former staff members moved through the crowded lobby under the heavy weight of their own public disgrace, no one stopped them. No one offered a single word of sympathy. Only the quiet, satisfying murmurs of accountability followed them out into the harsh light of day. And once the heavy glass doors finally closed behind them, Isabella turned back to her guests and to her new staff, not with a sense of relief, but with an unshakable resolve. This wasn't justice. This was a beginning. "The real reform," she announced to the room, "starts right now." And with those powerful words, the Horizon Grand Hotel stopped being just a name carved in stone and became something more. It became the place where everything changed.